Today I'm going to talk about percentages and what they mean. We're going to look at 2 or 3 different things, how to do it with and without a calculator, and what does interest mean. So an easy question would be, find 10% of 60. This is called a percentage of an amount. And this is the way I like to think about it. If you're doing it without a calculator, 50% means splitting 100% into 2 parts. 10% means splitting 100 into 10 parts. 25% means splitting 25 and putting it into 4 parts, etc. So these are the tips on how you find 50% of a number: 10%, 25%, 5% and 1%. For example, if we were to find 50% of 200, all we'd have to do would be to take 200 and divide it by 2, because 100% is the total amount, so 50% is half of that. So our answer would be 100. Hopefully that's nice and simple for you, and simply a recap. So 30% of 80, this is how you could do it without a calculator. The first thing I would do would be to find 10%. Now 10% is always the easiest thing to find. So if you're ever stuck, just find 10% of a number. And the reason why is because to get from 100%, which is 80, to 10%, which is 8, you just simply divide by 10, which in this instance means removing a 0, or effectively, more mathematically speaking, removing all the digits here, one space to the right, which means 80 becomes 8. Now to find 30%, we need 3 lots of the 10%, so we need to add all these together, giving us the 24. Similarly, we could find 85% of something. We're going to use a similar method. First of all, you start off finding 10%, which is 8. We're then going to combine the following: 50, 10, 10, 10 and 5. Now 5 is really easy. To get from 10% to 5%, all you need to do is half the 10 to get 5, so you also need to half the numerical value. Add all of these together, 68. Now I'd like you to pause the video and have a go using a similar method of finding 72% of 80. Pause the video now. Welcome back. Hopefully you've got something like this as your answer. You may have laid it out differently, but this is a way of doing it. Now what I'd like you to have a go at is finding all of these answers for 270 and all of these answers for 440. And then your last step you need to do is to find the sum of all the answers. So I want you to add together all the answers in these bubbles together. And then you're going to do the same for 440. You're going to find all the answers for all of these bubbles, and then you're going to add them all together, giving us an answer here. Welcome back. Hopefully you got this as your answer for 270. Now, I would like you to email me, if you think you're the first person to do this, the sum of all the bubbles for the next question. And we'll go over the answer next lesson, or I'll email it out to you. So what's the sum of all the bubbles for the final one we did, which was 440? Now we're going to talk about how we do this with a calculator. Now this is the preferable way of doing it. Example 1 is find 39% of 1450. The first thing you need to do is rewrite the percentage as a decimal. Now percent means out of 100. So to get it from a percentage to a decimal, we simply divide by 100. And then we take this, which is called a multiplier, and multiply it by the original amount. So it's just effectively this multiplied by this, which gives us our answer. Example 2. Again, we take the 49%, we change it to a multiplier, and then we multiply it by the original amount. Final question, 0.4 multiplied by 30 is 12. This time, we don't need to write an additional 0 on the end because it's insignificant. It doesn't change the decimal. Whether you write it as 0.4 or 0.40, they are both the same. this requires you to do one more step because it asks you how many are female. So you could then do 30 minus 12 because the 12 represents 40% and then the 18 represents the amount left over, which is 60%. Okay, looking at this question here, I'd like you to answer these blue questions and then these yellow questions, and I would like you, please, to upload the one yellow tile which doesn't fit with these blue tiles on an email if you think you're the first person to do this. So each of these blue questions match with each of these yellows, and one of them is left over. Which is the leftover one? Please email me your answer. Here's some further questions if you are finished and you'd like a little bit more practice. So if you would also like to practice these, but this time using a calculator, these are really good practice. They say you have to practice something 42 times for it to become a routine, so I'd highly recommend you practice doing these questions and then finding the sum of all the bubbles. Here is the answer to 690, and I'm going to show you the answer to 950 here. Now we're going to go on to some more complicated questions. So if we're writing 115% as a decimal, we would take the original 100% and this time we're going to add 15% on it. So as bar, it would look like this, and then writing it as a decimal would be 1.15. Now this effectively is called a percentage increase because we are taking the 100% and we are adding on to it. So whenever we are increasing a percentage, the number here needs to be larger than 1. So keep that in mind over the next few examples. We're going to have a go at example 4 and 5. Maybe you would like to pause the video now and have a go at them before I go over them. This will help with your memorisation skills. Welcome back. So let's go over 4. The value of Frank's house has gone up by 20% in the last year. If the house was worth this amount 1 year ago, how much is it worth now? So there are a couple of ways of doing it, and absolutely you can do it a different way to me, but this is a way of doing it in just one step and will help you with harder problems we will go on to in future lessons. So we take the 100%. Like we said, it's an increase problem, so we are going to add on to the 100%, giving us 120%. We then need to write this as a decimal. This is going to be 120% converted into a decimal is clearly going to be 1.2. So we've gone from the 120 to the 1.2 simply by dividing by 100. And we are going to take this number 1.2 and multiply it by the amount, giving us our answer. I'm going to ask my Alexa for the answer. Alexa, what is 1.2 multiplied by 150,000?
1.2 times 150,000 is 180,000.
So my Alexa told me my answer was 180,000. Now keep this example in mind because we're going to be going over this kind of question soon, which is a reduction question. So let's just go over again the increase question. So this time we're increasing by 60% and this one is increasing by 7. So what we're going to do is the following. We are going to take the 160%, convert that to 1.6, times it by 50. Nice and easy. This one's a little bit tricky and I'm going to tell you the common mistake people make with this. Some people write down 1.7 and this is clearly wrong, and the reason why is because 1.7 represents 170%, but we're not doing 170%, we are doing 107%. So our answer, quite rightly, is 92.02. Now if you'd like to have a practice of these, here are your questions. Some of you might know how to do this intuitively, however, I would recommend you do a few of these in your books now. If you'd like one with bars, here is a bar worksheet and an example question for you. They are the exact same questions but laid out differently. Now we're going to do a reduction. So before I said if it was an increase question, it was greater than 1. But now because it's a reduction question, the percentage multiplier needs to be less than 1. And that is a general rule that will always work. So this time we are going to be focusing on the percentage reduction. And the percentage reduction this time is 30%. So we're going to think about 100%, and this time let's take off 30% rather than add it on. So this is our whole bar, and this time we'll get confused with. But if you understand the concept of adding and subtracting, this is 3. Okay, so you might want to leave your answer like this, but this is incorrect. And because we're dealing with a monetary amount, and for those is typical for most types of money. So we need to also add the 0 on the end. So unlike the previous questions where it was dealing with non-money, it doesn't change the number, which it doesn't in this case. So now here are your questions I'd like you to have a go at. Please spend a few minutes practicing a few of these and making a careful note in your book. Finally, here's some mixed questions. I'd like you to pause the video, have a go at these and check your answers. Some additional questions if you'd like to do these.